Married men of Reddit, what moment with your future wife made you think, yep, I'm asking this girl to marry me? Story 1. While we were dating, probably only a couple of months in, my now wife and I were attending a dinner party in the mountains about 45 minutes from my place. It was an average night, nothing special, had a beer and a steak, hung out with some mutual friends, and called it a bit early to head back home. It was still light outside as we hit the final freeway to head back home. On the ride, about 20 minutes from home, my wife starts crying hysterically. She had been feeling like her mutual friends didn't really care for her anymore and didn't seem to really understand her. As she continues to cry and process why she felt the way she did, I did my best to listen and console her. Then it hit me. It wasn't an epiphany, more like a Mack truck right to my intestines. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as beads of sweat began forming on my face while my eyes started to dart to the nearest sign of an exit with a gas station or a grocery store. Anywhere where I could safely pull over. I tried not to make anything obvious as I shifted in my seat uncomfortably while my wife continued to cry. At some point I must have winced or some other indication that I was in pain. She stopped crying and asked me if everything was alright. Nope. Satan himself was massaging my intestines, preparing my anus for a blowout sale like the doors opening at Walmart for Black Friday. I tell her that I need to stop at a gas station, white-knuckled as I stopped listening and focused all my efforts on using my sphincter as a dam to keep the shit behind it from flooding Underwear City. With the nearest exit being a mile away, I knew I was doomed. I would be shitting my pants in front of the woman I liked, but I'd only spent a couple of months with. I had the choice to risk my dignity by pulling off to the side of a busy freeway or potentially risking the first true relationship I'd ever had by shitting myself in the car. Luckily for me, and you as you read this, I chose the former. I looked at my wife and told her I had to pull over now. Now? Yes, now. I flipped the hazards on, other drivers probably assuming that I had a car malfunction, and I pulled over to the other side of the road. Little did they know that the true hazard was being held in by a quickly weakening muscle. I promptly exited the car, ran as far into the field as I could get, but still unfortunately easily visible to the passing traffic, dropped trow, and proceeded to pepper the landscape with what I can only assume would have to be the cause of death for a couple of species of flowers and the grass which happened to now be covered in my toxic mess. The exclamation, not the noun. I didn't remember to bring any wipeable material with me. Oh god, what do I do now? I can't go back to the car smelling of this? So I cut my losses, took my boxers off, wiped my covered ass, and then put my pants back on, letting my junk float freely in the jeans. By the time I go back to the car, I assume my wife would end our relationship right there. She was gorgeous, and me being on the nerdy side, I already knew I was lucky to even be dating her. I got into the car and didn't say a word. Silence. And then laughter. She burst out laughing and said she didn't care about what happened that evening with her friends because that made it all worth it. That was the day I knew I would marry my wife. Story 2. She almost died. When her parents took her to the hospital, they found out she had cancer unrelated to the blood. We were 13, and we had been best friends since age 5. I realized that I didn't want a life without her when we all thought she was done for. I wanted to be her husband. To this day, my mom thinks I have the power of premonition, but this is what's called a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm not psychic in any way. Obviously, I didn't marry her at age 13. A few years later, my parents bought the house next to her parents, and I told her my intentions. A few years after that, we told our families that we were both an item. Finally, about a few years later, we were married, and we waited until we were both emotionally mature for that last bit, so it took quite some time. I never doubt kids when they say they truly love someone because I did even then. Things don't always work out how you want, but for me, it worked out better than I could have hoped. We've been together for 16 years, and I still love her intensely and perpetually. She's one of my best friends. Our sex life is phenomenal to this day, literally, and I'm not me without her at this point. We have had a few scares since marriage. She's been hospitalized several times, and once she was almost gone again. I know she's going to die before me. She did not win the genetic lottery by any means, whereas I don't think I've ever been sick for over a decade. Because of that, we live a very full life. Story 3. Things were going really well, and I was saying to myself, if this keeps up, I think next summer I'll pop the question. Then my mother had a stroke. We were all sitting in the waiting area outside the ICU because only 2 people were allowed in at a time. It was my now wife's birthday and a Wednesday, and she didn't hesitate to take the day off to sit with me and my family. I went to visit my father at home, and she came with me. Her Italian instincts kicked in and she brought a load of groceries and a lasagna with her. My father was a mess at the hospital, and it fell on me and my siblings to speak with the doctors and make plans. I would get home and pour myself some bourbon. She made dinner and just sat with me while I silently sobbed. It wasn't about how great we were when things were good, but about how perfect she was when things were bad. I bought the ring 2 months later. This all happened just before Christmas, since my mother was still in the hospital on Christmas Eve. I got a last-minute reservation at my father's favorite restaurant. My girlfriend was with her family, but we got to the table to find a note that she had already called ahead to buy us 2 bottles of wine. Story 4. When I first told my father that I was dating someone new, he jokingly asked, "What's her name? What does she do? What's her bra size?" I told her about it, hoping to prepare her for his sense of humor, and she thought it was hilarious. The first time they met, she introduced herself by saying, "Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm in college and I'm a B cup." My father was horrified, and my mother was laughing hysterically, and I was in love. Story 5. I was 18 and I had just gotten out of a dental appointment where 2 of my wisdom teeth were pulled out. I was drooling stains of blood all over my shirt, and it was summertime. My girlfriend at the time was 16, took what little money she had from her allowance, bought me a box of ice cream, and biked 25 minutes just to deliver that box of ice cream and see how I was doing. With bloodstains all over, she still gave me that look of love and planted a kiss on me. That was almost 20 years ago, and I still can't imagine having a happier life without her in it. Wait, your girlfriend was 16 at the time? Story 6. When her car was damaged in a parking lot while under my care, not at fault, and her first words to me when seeing the damage was, "Are you okay?" That moment when you discover the woman you're dating cares more for you than an expensive intimate object is a moment you know. Story 7. I've been married just over a week, so I've been telling the story a lot lately. We were 3 days into a month-long backpacking trip in Southeast Asia. We're staying in a seedy hotel in Bangkok, and she gets a bad case of food poisoning. It's coming out of both of her ends for 24 hours. I, of course, am now designated as her nurse. I'm refilling her water bottle, getting her soup from the restaurant outside, keeping her company, and most importantly, emptying the trash can she keeps puking into. After one trip to empty her vomit bucket, I came back into the bathroom and she's asleep. I looked at her and thought, I'm not even bothered by this. I would do anything for her. This is the woman I'm going to marry. She's a disgusting barf fairy, but she's my disgusting barf fairy. 0 regrets. Story 8. When I was a young lad, I bought a pair of swords. Now, for some reason I still had them, but when my now wife agreed to come over to my place, I decided to hide them in a storage closet because why would any grown man have these? So a while down the line, she was looking for something in the said closet when I heard her say, "What the hell? Do you have swords? Why are you hiding these?" I was prepared to be mocked mercilessly when instead she handed me one and then started swinging. It was about that time when I realized I was going to marry her. You should have shouted "there can only be one" before beheading her. Story 9. This is from my dad. My parents met 39 years ago last Friday in a lineup for a movie. My mom's friend knew my dad from another friend and introduced them. My dad was known as a wild guy and my mom was seriously considering becoming a nun. Naturally, they started dating. A couple of months later, my mom found a lump in her breast. My dad's aunt died of breast cancer very young, and it just freaked him out, I guess. My mother had the lump removed, and thank God it was benign. But my dad had already rushed out and bought an engagement ring. He always claimed he knew from the moment he saw her, but a couple of glasses of wine and he'll tell you that he saw what life would be like without her, and it wasn't worth living. They never fight, and they always work together. And my mom's heart still skips a beat when he comes home from work. Story 10. My best friend and I took forever to realize that we were infatuated with one another, embarrassingly so. Finally, we started dating and moved in together. Everything was perfect and I'd never been big on the idea of marriage, but laying in bed together one night, I realized that the thought of not having her was unbearable, and I didn't ever want to let her slip away. We'd only been together for about 6 weeks at that point, but I knew I wanted her to be mine. She died a couple of weeks ago, and I never got to ask her to marry me. The reason for her death was she died in a car accident. I don't want to post a lot of details publicly, and I don't want to share more. It's been really hard for me to deal with this. I can't put into words how important she was to me. For someone like myself, I don't particularly enjoy most people. She was my absolute favorite, the best person in my life. The joy we had together was immeasurable, and everyone who knew us together knew we were soulmates. That's where all the feelings of pointlessness are stemming from. Story 11. My wife and I were good friends before we became romantically involved. She was one of the guys, and it wasn't unusual to roughhouse a little. This sounds sexual in retrospect, but it really wasn't at the time. You know that thing you do to your sister when you were 12 where you'd pin her down and threaten to spit on her by letting the spit hang out of your mouth and then sucking it back in at the last minute? Dear God, I hope I'm not the only one who did this. Well, I did that to my friend's now wife, except I waited too long and I accidentally spit directly in her eye. Instead of being furious like a normal person, she busted out laughing. We've been married for 12 years now. So that's how you get the girl? I've been doing it all wrong! Story 12. I got mad and yelled at her for some stupid shit because I had been in a toxic relationship prior to meeting her, and I thought that's what couples did, scream and argue. I expected her to yell back at me, but she just stared at me for a moment and asked if I was done. I said I was, and she proceeded to explain to me that people who love one another don't treat each other that way. We can disagree with one another, but there's no reason to be mean. If we're gonna be together, please don't be mean to me again. That was 26 years ago, and we've been married for 25 years. Story 13. I'm from Michigan. Back in December 2014, I was in Delaware for a business trip. I ended up getting food poisoning, which brought on DKA. For those non-diabetes, basically your blood gets poisoned and your body tries to fight it off, which proves to be futile. I was vomiting constantly and then kept drifting in and out of consciousness. My wife, then girlfriend, called me about 20 to 30 times before I finally answered. The only thing I could force myself to say was, "Hi, baby, I'm really sick," and then I blacked out again. What seemed like 5 minutes passed, which was actually 12 to 13 hours, when I heard a banging on my hotel room door. I heard my girlfriend's voice yelling, "It's me, let me in." I screamed as loud as I could, get in here, and then I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital a day later. I found out that when I didn't answer the door, she ran downstairs, got a key, came up, and called the ambulance. The ambulance said that they would be there in 30 minutes. She said that's not soon enough. She put me in a rolling computer chair and pushed me to the elevator and out her car, threw my near lifeless body in the back seat, and drove me to the hospital. When all said and done, my body had a blood sugar level of 1,400. My normal range is about 110 to 140, and my white blood cell count was around 3,000. I'm not 100% sure about this number, but I know it was high. My wife sat next to me for about 6 days in the hospital, sleeping in the chair next to me, left to eat, but came right back. She didn't leave my side. I should also mention this was only 4 months after we started dating. However, we had been friends for a few years before this. I found out later that if she would have waited for the ambulance, I wouldn't have made it. She literally saved my life. She sacrificed her time, risked getting fired, and failing classes to drive 13 hours from Michigan to Delaware to take care of me. Once it all hit me as to what she had done, I was completely speechless and realized that if this girl was willing to do something like this for me, I must have been pretty special to her. I made it a priority once I recovered to ask her mother and father for a blessing, which they both gave me. I was married to her in May 2016. One of the scariest things ever to happen to me ended up showing my girlfriend's devotion and love for me. We just hit our first anniversary, although we were a young couple and we're still kicking ass and going strong. Story 14. It wasn't like a thunderbolt thing, but right after we first banged, she got up and walked naked across the room to the bathroom, and I'll always remember how good it felt laying there and how this was definitely the hottest woman who had ever walked naked across my room. I thought then, I could marry this girl. Of course, it wasn't just the hotness. Doesn't help that she's a financial genius, has 2 degrees, a great paying job, and is the most patient person I know. What the f*** is she doing wasting her life with me? I'll never know. But I'm grateful. Story 15. Engaged. Our first date lasted 12 hours because we couldn't stop talking. Our second date was supposed to be just dinner, but it lasted almost 2 days. She drove away after the second date, and I couldn't imagine my life without her in it. I was ecstatic to find out she felt the same. So you guys are on, what, like your 4th date now? Story 16. I lived in a half-decent apartment in Hell's Kitchen in NYC. The place had a tub that was massively stained when I moved in. Every hot chick I dated tried to get that stain out. This was in the mid-90s when I was young and single in NYC, so that means plenty of women took a shot at it. My future wife came out to the bathroom one day and nonchalantly said, "Clean the tub." I ran into the bathroom and I couldn't believe my eyes. That was the sword and the stone. How did you do it? I don't give up. Edit. I've now asked her how she did it. She claimed it was nothing more than Ajax and bleach. It was orange, so we were thinking of an iron stain. Sorry, there isn't a more magical answer, but I guess the truth is her resolve dissolves all else. No, seriously, how did she clean it? Story 17. We were already engaged, but this experience solidified it for me. I had surgery go wrong and ended up in a medically induced coma for 5 days. All I remember after leaving the surgery was being rolled into an elevator, and all of a sudden I'm in a dream I can't wake up from. Everything was black and foggy, and I could see my wife and son off in the distance. So I started walking towards them, but when I got close, they disappeared into the darkness. I noticed there was a strange creature that resembled a spider nearby, and it was following me. It had these bright pink diamond spots all over its body, and never really came out of the shadows. Whenever I took a step, the creature moved with me. It never got too close or too far, it just kept the same distance. I was capable of thought in this dream, and I eventually just accepted it as death. I figured that this was what death was like, and I just wandered around in that darkness with the same creature for what felt like years. Eventually, I woke up. When I woke up, my wife walked into the room, and it was almost like the slow-motion scenes in the new Judge Dredd movie. Her hair was glowing, and she looked like an angel, and everything was in slow motion. It was insane, especially since I had seen her disappear into the darkness, and I thought I would never see her again. I asked her repeatedly how long I had been gone. I was sure it was years, but she told me it was only 5 days. I just broke down and cried my eyes out. The feeling of seeing her disappear and living without her was so awful I can't even describe it. Story 18. My wife was DJing a fundraiser for her work at a bowling alley. I'm her sidekick, setting things up and taking requests from folks. So we were snacking on some fries and she started choking/coughing. The next thing I know, she started to puke and I instantly throw my hands out to catch the majority of the vomit. She looked me in the eyes with the most sincere look of shock. She was stunned that I loved her enough to catch her vomit to keep her from making a scene at her work party. Been together for 9 years, married for 1.5, thanks to the Supreme Court. Story 19. We had been together for almost 1.5 years when I left her. To drink and be a piece of shit, basically. I was an alcoholic with a self-destruct button sitting next to the chip on my shoulder. So I left because I wouldn't let myself be happy. The one person who never gave up on me was her. She would come to see me and make sure I was eating and alive. Then one day she asked me to dinner. I got excited and then nervous. When she showed up to take me out, showing me I was a worthwhile person in her eyes, it gave me the strength to be sober. That was it. If someone could love me enough to care about me even though I was drinking myself to the depths I didn't even know existed, the least I could do was be a real human for her and show her that she made the right choice. I got sober and we got hitched over 1 year later, and now we have a baby on the way. She just asked me to dinner when I thought I was dirt, and it saved my life. That's when I knew I would marry her. Story 20. I knew on our first date. She's honestly the most loving, caring, dependable, smart, funny, and knowledgeable person I have ever met. She is everything I could ever want in a woman. Everything I never knew I wanted. I have said that I would die for someone before, but her, I know I would. Before, I said it because it was something to say, something you were supposed to feel, but I would take a bullet for her with a smile on my face. There is nothing in this world that I wouldn't do to make her happy or see her smile. She's treated me better than I ever could have imagined being treated, and I literally thanked God every day for her. She made me believe in love at first sight. She redefined love. I knew from the moment I turned around and looked at her at Dunkin' Donuts that I wanted to marry her. If only she felt the same. We broke up a week ago last Wednesday. It's the oddest breakup I've ever had. I've been destroyed by women in the past, and I've had to go to therapy because of what women have done to me in the past. But with her, I'm sad that I won't be the man to marry her. But I'm so thankful to have known her, and to have spent the time I did with her. And I still thank God for her. I know this pain will go away, and I will be better. I'm not suicidal, nor am I spinning into a depression. I am sad, I am in pain, and I miss her. God, how much I miss her. But she was and still is completely and totally worth every ounce of pain, sadness, and sorrow I feel.